the Pittsburgh Steelers are on the field, and there are obviously always eyeballs around the Pittsburgh Steelers. But this is interesting. Obviously, we're not getting any Aaron Rodgers. And again, there are only 3 preseason games now, Caroline, so not 4. So that means that the way that starters are played is different per team. But they're choosing not to play Aaron Rodgers, which means that the first time Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf will get a meaningful snap in any sort of a game against a competition that we've seen, not including joint practices or obviously practices of their own. The first time they'll get any what feels like live in-game reps be the first snap of week 1. I mean, that's a bold decision that just says, hey, we trust everything outside of the game absolutely to be able to get us the, let's say, the comfort with wide receiver 1 and QB1 that we need.
I can't be overly concerned about this. I really can't, just because Aaron Rodgers is such a vet. I mean, he's been in this league for 20 years. And you can say, well, it's a new team and a new scheme and new receivers. And he was signed late in the offseason. Yeah, well, Aaron Rodgers knew, we all knew long before he put pen to paper that he was going to be signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. That Aaron Rodgers has had the Steelers playbook for much longer than he's actually contractually been a Pittsburgh Steeler. That's the entire reason why in the offseason he was throwing to DK Metcalf. That wasn't just for funsies. That wasn't just for S's and G's. And that wasn't just because they're besties. It's because Aaron Rodgers knew that he was going to be throwing to DK Metcalf in the regular season. So I can't be overly concerned about. If Aaron Rodgers, if this was maybe last year, if Aaron Rodgers was just coming off of the Achilles tear and this was going to be his first game back, week 1 would be his first game back from injury, then maybe I would be a little bit more skeptical. Maybe I would want him to kind of knock the rust off a little bit in the preseason, but that's not the case. So I cannot be overly concerned about a certified veteran in Aaron Rodgers not getting preseason work. I mean, he's old. One wrong hit in the preseason, Fitz, and he's done for the season.
You're right. Everything you just said is right. I just want to, as the kids say, keep that same energy on the opposite end of it then. Because everything you just said makes total sense. But this is what we do. Like a quarterback gets signed and we're like, oh my gosh, they were out in the park throwing and they're trying to get that rhythm together and that's really going to put them on the same page. And then we do the same dumb thing where it's like, oh man, reps matter. I mean, there are starting quarterbacks in the NFL that refuse to give up practice reps because they want every single rep, and reps matter. And now we've had coaches in the preseason say, hey, well, it was important to get those extra 10, 20 reps. And so, like, we can't have it both ways. I agree with you. I don't necessarily think it's a huge deal. I do think that there's going to be some communication. That's natural. I mean, my God, we saw Garrett Wilson, who is also a wildly talented wide receiver, and Aaron Rodgers arguing on the sidelines during practices about routes and understanding of who's going to do what where. And the answer that we got from both of them at the time was, well, it's just going to take a little bit of time for us to get comfortable together. I agree with you. DK not playing at the same time as Aaron Rodgers in the preseason, who cares until we care. If in week 1 this offense comes out and it's disjointed, or there's an interception where DK runs a route that Aaron Rodgers doesn't expect, and we're all trying to figure out whose fault it is. If that happens, we can look back to this preseason and say, did they get enough work together? I'm just trying to be fair in the way that we cover Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf, the same that we cover everybody else in the league, and the way that we've covered Aaron Rodgers leading up to this point, which then, Caroline, sort of brings to me this whole question of, like, who is Aaron Rodgers today? Like, is Aaron Rodgers a better guest on Pat McAfee than he is a starting quarterback in the NFL? Like, I understand that we just assume that Aaron Rodgers is going to come out and be a world beater because he's Aaron Rodgers, but frankly, he's had some bad moments over the last couple of years with the Jets, and I'm not convinced the Steelers are better than the Jets were a year ago. So I don't know why we're just suddenly assuming that Aaron Rodgers steps behind center and everything's going to be fun and roses and glory for the Steelers.
I am not assuming that. I am not assuming that in the slightest. And when it comes to reps in the preseason, I evaluate every quarterback and every team totally and completely differently because every quarterback and every team is in a completely different position. I was screaming about Caleb Williams not playing in the Bears' first preseason game because I'm thinking Caleb Williams is in his second year in the NFL with a new offensive-minded head coach. He should probably get some reps in the preseason. But Caleb Williams is not a 20-year vet in this league. So I think you have to approach every single situation differently because they are all different. So that's the reason why I'm not overly concerned about Aaron Rodgers. Now, I am not convinced that Aaron Rodgers is going to step in and all of a sudden make the Steelers a Super Bowl contender. Why would you believe that? I mean, when was the last time Aaron Rodgers made a team a Super Bowl contender? It wasn't a Jets uniform. So I can't expect that he's all of a sudden just going to come in and this team is all of a sudden a Super Bowl contender. And that's another thing is it's not just about Aaron Rodgers. Is this roster good enough? Like, is this team good enough? As long as Mike Tomlin is coaching the Steelers, they're always going to be relevant. They're always going to win 8 or 9 games. They're always probably going to be in the playoff conversation because I think Mike Tomlin is just that good of a coach. But the Steelers made a lot of, befuddling moves this past offseason that they replaced old, inexpensive players with old and expensive players. They didn't really adequately address the wide receiver position, in my opinion. So what makes the Steelers different than, say, the New York Jets? The coach?
I mean,
the uniform
to that end, think about, if we were just talking about the Steelers as a whole against the rest of the AFC, because Steelers fans are always angry that they're not winning playoff games. Okay. Well, Mike Tomlin is a great coach. I take nothing away from that. He's on the same tier as many of the other great coaches in the AFC, but I'm not looking at Mike Tomlin saying he's a better coach than, I don't know, the Harbaugh that's in his same division that has the best team in that division. He's not a better coach than Andy Reid, for example. So is he one of the better coaches in the NFL? Yeah, for sure. But he's dealing with the quarterback that at best, if everything goes swimmingly for the Steelers this year, at best, they have the 3rd best quarterback in their own division. Like, I'm not even talking about in the conference. In their own division, they have the 3rd best quarterback. Like, when you start looking at it from those, and I realize that defense has a lot of talent on it. Some guys that are very, very, very good. I understand that. It's the same damn thing we said a year ago about the Jets. Man, we said this Jets defense is really going to be good. They got Garrett Wilson. They got Aaron Rodgers. I was one of the few people out here saying, I don't care. I still don't think the Jets are going to be good. And everybody crushed me for it. While I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, you got a really good defense in Pittsburgh. You got DK Metcalf and you got Aaron Rodgers. Okay. Yeah. Does that make you better than the Ravens? No. Does that make you better than the Chiefs? No. Does that make you better than the Bills? No. I mean, we can go up and down the list. Like, look, I think what we're missing, not you and I, but what some of the collective football community is missing is that everything's going to have to break right, and the Steelers are going to have to exceed the level of talent that they have on the field compared to the rest of the AFC to even be a playoff team. Like, that's where this team truly is, roster top to bottom, quarterback, all of these other things that we rate the rest of the AFC on. They're just not as good as most of the other AFC playoff teams.
And that's kind of the curse of being in the AFC, right? That it maybe in the NFC, you can be just good enough to find yourselves in the playoffs. Even if you're not a contender legitimately, you can still find your way in the playoffs. And that's kind of where the Steelers have been the last, 5+ years. Good enough to get the playoffs, but not good enough to win a playoff game. I don't think the addition of Aaron Rodgers and swapping of spit of old and expensive players is necessarily going to be the difference between making the playoffs and not winning a game and making the playoffs and winning a game. My question here is, though, what do Steelers fans expect? What does the Steelers organization expect?
Steelers fans demand a playoff win. I don't know what the organization expects. Steelers fans demand a playoff win. And like I say it to you all the time. People in hell want ice water. Yeah. Or they think Tomlin should be fired.
And I think I think it's a conversation that's okay that we start to have. I love Mike Tomlin. I love the Steelers' approach to not being too quick to pull the plug on anything. But Steelers fans, I feel like, and I'm not saying everyone, this isn't a blanket statement, but I have heard the same Steelers fans say, we demand playoff wins and Mike Tomlin will never be fired. Well, sometimes those two things can't exist in the same world. Sometimes you have to start doing things differently. And I will give the Steelers credit. They have approached this offseason in a much different way than the Steelers normally approach off seasons. That doesn't mean it's the right approach, but it's at least different. Throw something at the wall and see if it sticks. Maybe a different approach if things just aren't going the way that you expect it. When you make all of these moves to have different results, maybe you have to start doing other things differently. And maybe we start to take a different approach to Mike Tomlin. I'm not saying he should be fired. I'm not saying he will be fired. I'm just saying that if you're not winning playoff games and you refuse to fire the coach or even at least entertain the idea of a new voice in Pittsburgh, then maybe you're going to consistently get the same results.
Maybe, but also I say this all the time. I live in New England, right? And I see it every Sunday when I go to sports bars, and fans are last year were disgusted that Gerard Mayo turns out wasn't the next Bill Belichick. Who knew? Like, you see franchises come off. We talked about the Colts and their ability to watch Peyton Manning hand the ball off to Andrew Luck, essentially. And then all of a sudden now it's like, well, wait, we always have a quarterback. Packers fans have been spoiled for generations in the way that make most fans jealous. I understand that this is where we say, well, look at the history. Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, now we get to Mike Tomlin. They're there forever, and they're amazing coaches. Look at the history, right? But every time you dip into the coaching practices, man, you dip into the possibility that things are going to be ugly. I don't think the Steelers are going to make the playoffs. I think the Steelers are going to be a very hot start. When they hit the meat of their schedule, it's all going to fall apart. And I do believe that this is the first year that Mike Tomlin gets a losing season. I also think that Mike Tomlin is a better coach than most of the coaches sitting around in the NFL. Go ahead, Steelers fans. Fire him. Fire him. Get rid of him because he's 53, I think. Let him go somewhere else, Carolina, and see what he can do. So, wrap it here. Do you think the Steelers will make the playoffs this year?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, that's it.
And if
that's
they
it.
miss the
we both agree.
playoffs, don't you have to start having a conversation? Like, Mike Tomlin is a fantastic coach. And if the Steelers fire him tomorrow, he will have a new job 5 seconds after the news breaks that he got fired. But sometimes you need a new voice. Sometimes you need a fresh perspective. Maybe things have just gotten stale. I'm not saying they have. I'm just saying there is an avenue where we can have that conversation dependent on the results of this season.